My boyfriend texted me, "We need to end this. I can't do it anymore." I replied with one word, "Okay." That single word destroyed the plan he'd spent years perfecting. My name is Claire Whitaker. I'm 31 years old, and until that Sunday night, I genuinely believed that loving someone meant being patient enough to survive their worst moments. What I didn't realize was that I'd spent 4 years surviving the same moment over and over again. The text arrived just before 10 o'clock. I was curled up on my couch with a cup of tea that had already gone cold, half watching a cooking show and half thinking about a presentation I had scheduled for Monday morning. It should have felt like a normal evening. Instead, I remember staring at my phone and feeling something strange settle over me. I wasn't shocked when I saw the message. If anything, it felt familiar. Ryan had used the same playbook before, and part of me already knew where it was supposed to lead. The first time happened less than a year into our relationship. We were leaving a party, and I asked if we could head home early because I had work the next morning. Somehow that turned into an argument about how I didn't prioritize him enough. 20 minutes later, he was telling me maybe we weren't compatible. Back then, I panicked. I called him repeatedly. I apologized. I replayed the entire conversation, searching for whatever mistake I had supposedly made. By the time he finally agreed to see me, I was the one asking for forgiveness. The second time came after I received a promotion at work. I had to cancel dinner with his parents because a project deadline was moved forward unexpectedly. Ryan disappeared for nearly 2 days. When he finally answered my calls, he explained that he needed to know whether I cared enough to fight for the relationship. The third time hurt the most. We had started talking seriously about moving in together. I suggested putting both names on the lease and creating a clear plan for shared expenses. Ryan accused me of treating love like a business contract. 3 days later, I found myself standing outside his apartment with a handwritten letter, apologizing for being too cautious, too analytical, too difficult. I still remember how embarrassed I felt sliding that envelope under his door. At the time, I thought I was saving the relationship. Now I understand I was teaching him something. Looking back, every argument seemed to end the same way. Ryan would pull away, and somehow I became the one trying to repair the damage. At the time, I called it commitment. Now it felt more like a routine we'd both fallen into. By the fourth breakup text, the pattern wasn't hidden anymore. It was impossible to ignore. That's why I answered differently. I still loved Ryan at the time. The difference was that I no longer had the energy to keep repeating the same cycle. I was tired of proving my loyalty every few months. Tired of treating every disagreement like an emergency. Tired of feeling as though my place in the relationship depended on how convincingly I could beg someone to stay. So I typed, "Okay." Then I set my phone down and went to bed. Ryan never replied that night, but that wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed with me was waking up the next morning and realizing I'd slept better than I had in months. The next morning, there was still no message from him. No explanation. No attempt to take back what he'd said. I made coffee, went to work, and tried to focus on my day. By Tuesday, I noticed he'd viewed my Instagram story within minutes of me posting it. Wednesday was the same. Thursday too. Ryan wasn't gone. He was waiting. For a couple of days, I tried not to think about any of it. I focused on work, answered emails, and told myself I was fine. The strange part was that life felt calmer than it had in a long time. His name was Nathan Hale. Ryan had introduced us nearly a year earlier. Nathan wasn't a close friend, and he certainly wasn't someone I'd secretly been interested in while dating Ryan. In fact, for most of the year, he was simply a familiar face who occasionally appeared at group dinners, birthday parties, and work events. The connection between them was simple. Nathan and Ryan had once been friends. Very close friends. That friendship had ended badly years before I met either of them. Ryan always described the situation vaguely, usually blaming miscommunication or different priorities. Nathan never talked about it at all. What stood out wasn't their history. It was the way Nathan treated people. He listened. Actually listened. He remembered details from conversations months earlier. He noticed when someone felt uncomfortable. He never seemed interested in competing for attention. The first time I realized that was during a dinner where Ryan made a joke at my expense. It wasn't cruel enough to cause a scene, but it was sharp enough to sting. Everyone laughed. Nathan didn't. He simply asked me a question about a project I had been excited about and redirected the conversation. It was such a small thing that I almost forgot it. Almost. Over the next year, there were dozens of moments like that. Nothing romantic. Nothing inappropriate. Just small reminders that kindness didn't have to come with conditions attached. By Thursday evening, I found myself staring at his name in my contacts. I opened the message window, closed it, opened it again, then finally typed, "Hey, Ryan ended things on Sunday. I know this might be random, but would you want to grab coffee sometime?" I nearly deleted the message. Instead, I hit send. His reply arrived less than an hour later. "Of course. Saturday morning work?" I smiled before I could stop myself. Saturday works. When Saturday arrived, we met at a small coffee shop near my apartment. I expected the conversation to feel awkward. It didn't. 3 hours disappeared without either of us noticing. We talked about work, family, terrible reality television, travel plans that never happened, and all the little details people usually save for someone they've known much longer. Eventually, the conversation drifted toward Ryan. Nathan wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and hesitated before speaking. Can I tell you something honestly? Sure. He studied the table for a second. I always wondered how long you'd put up with it. I already knew what he meant. Put up with what? The emotional roller coaster. His tone wasn't judgmental. If anything, it sounded sympathetic. I watched him do versions of this with other people. Friends, coworkers, family members. If he felt insecure, he created distance. Then he waited to see who would chase him. I stared at him. So it wasn't just me? No. He offered a small smile. It was never just you. That answer stayed with me the rest of the day. Later that evening, we had dinner together. The restaurant was one I'd wanted to try for months. Ryan always refused because he considered it overrated. Nathan ordered too much food and insisted we share everything. By the time dessert arrived, I couldn't remember the last time a conversation had felt that easy. No walking on eggshells. No trying to predict someone's mood. No worrying about saying the wrong thing. Just two people enjoying each other's company. As we left, Nathan stopped beside his car. Tonight was nice? It was. A faint smile crossed his face. You seem lighter. I laughed softly. I think that's because nobody threatened to break up with me during dinner. He laughed too. The sound followed me all the way home. The next afternoon, Nathan came over to watch a movie. Nothing dramatic. Just a lazy Sunday. Snacks on the coffee table, and someone whose presence didn't make me anxious. Halfway through the movie, headlights swept across my living room window. A car pulled into the driveway. The moment I heard the doorbell, my stomach tightened. I already knew who it was. Nathan noticed the change in my expression. You okay? I glanced toward the front door. No. The doorbell rang again. When I opened the door, Ryan was standing on my porch. His hair was messy. His eyes were red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept much all week. Behind him, his older sister sat in the driver's seat of her car, watching the house as though she had front-row tickets to a show. Ryan stared at me. Why haven't you called me? I folded my arms. You broke up with me. His jaw tightened. It's been a week, Claire. I know. I've been waiting. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Then his attention shifted past my shoulder, into the living room, toward the couch, toward Nathan. The color drained from Ryan's face. For several seconds, he simply stood there, staring. Then he looked back at me. What the hell is he doing here? The question wasn't really about Nathan. Ryan was staring at him, but I could tell what had actually shaken him. He'd expected to find me waiting. Instead, he'd found proof that the world hadn't stopped moving after he left. Nathan came over to watch a movie. His eyes narrowed. A movie. That's usually what people do when they watch one. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have answered like that. But after a week of silence, accusations, and emotional games, my patience wasn't exactly at its strongest. Ryan glanced toward the living room again. Nathan had already stood up. He wasn't trying to hide. He wasn't acting guilty. If anything, he looked uncomfortable about being caught in the middle of something that had nothing to do with him. Ryan stepped closer. It's been a week. You mentioned that already. His expression tightened. Claire, that's not normal. I almost laughed. Not because the situation was funny, because hearing Ryan talk about normal felt absurd. A man who had broken up with me 4 times was standing on my porch trying to explain what healthy behavior looked like. You ended the relationship. I was upset. You said it was over. I didn't mean permanently. The words hung between us. This time, even Nathan looked surprised. Ryan seemed to realize what he'd admitted the moment he said it. His shoulders stiffened. I watched him struggle to recover. What I mean is... He rubbed the back of his neck. I thought we'd talk. We are talking. You know what I mean. Actually, I did. Ryan wasn't confused because I'd moved on. He was confused because I hadn't followed the script. I knew exactly how these situations usually ended. Ryan would pull away, I'd spend days trying to fix things, and sooner or later, we'd find our way back to each other as if nothing had happened. Except this time, the story had taken a different turn. What exactly were you waiting for? I asked. His answer came before he could stop himself. For you to call. Nathan lowered his eyes. I don't think he wanted Ryan to notice he'd heard that. Unfortunately, Ryan noticed anyway. His gaze snapped toward him. You mind giving us a minute? The request sounded polite. The tone underneath it wasn't. Nathan looked at me, rather than Ryan. It was such a small thing, but I appreciated it. He wasn't asking Ryan for permission. He was asking me. You want me to go? I considered it for a moment. Then I nodded. Just for a few minutes. Sure. Nathan grabbed his jacket and headed outside. As he passed me, he quietly said, Call if you need me. Ryan waited until the front door closed. Then he turned back toward me. The anger he'd been holding in all afternoon seemed to fade. What replaced it was somehow more familiar. Vulnerability. Or at least the version of vulnerability Ryan usually showed when another tactic wasn't working. He sat down heavily on the couch. For the first time since arriving, he looked tired. Not dramatic. Not broken. Just exhausted. Claire, I screwed up. I stayed standing. Partly because I wasn't sure I trusted myself to sit down. Partly because I didn't want the conversation to slip into old patterns. Ryan rubbed his hands together. I've had a horrible week. The old version of me would have asked questions immediately. What happened? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? This time I waited. Eventually he continued. I kept expecting my phone to ring. I didn't answer. You always called. There it was. The thing neither of us had fully said out loud yet. For years, Ryan had measured love by pursuit. Somewhere along the way, reassurance had become the center of our relationship. No matter how many times I proved I loved him, it never seemed to last. Ryan stared at the floor. I honestly thought you'd show up. His voice sounded smaller than usual. Not manipulative. Not rehearsed. Just honest. And somehow that honesty made the conversation sadder. Because he genuinely hadn't expected consequences. That answer seemed to hit him harder than I expected. Maybe because both of us knew there was a difference between missing someone and falling back into a familiar routine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Ryan asked the question that had clearly been bothering him since he arrived. Do you like him? I didn't pretend not to know who he meant. Nathan? He nodded. I thought carefully before answering. Yes. The word seemed to land somewhere deep. Ryan looked away. You moved on fast. No. His eyes returned to mine. No? I stopped waiting. The difference mattered. I wasn't suddenly over 4 years together. I wasn't pretending the relationship hadn't mattered. But once I stopped spending all my energy trying to save it, I had room to see things more clearly, including myself. Ryan leaned back against the couch. The fight seemed to drain out of him. For the next 20 minutes, he talked more honestly than he had in years. About work, about pressure, about feeling behind compared to his friends, about watching people get married and buy houses while he still felt uncertain about everything. Some of it made sense. Some of it made me feel sorry for him. But none of it changed the reality of what had happened. Eventually, he looked up. Do you know what scared me? What? His laugh was short and humorless. I always thought one day you'd realize you deserve better. I stared at him. That confession explained more than he probably intended. All those tests, all those breakups, all those attempts to force reassurance. Underneath them was fear. The problem was that fear had become its own self-fulfilling prophecy. Ryan had spent years trying to prevent abandonment. Instead, he created the conditions that guaranteed it. I sat down across from him. For the first time all afternoon, my voice softened. You know what's sad? What? I wasn't planning to leave. Ryan's eyes met mine. A small spark of hope appeared. Then I finished. But I couldn't keep living like that. The hope disappeared. Because he understood exactly what I meant. Ryan lowered his eyes and rubbed his hands together. For the first time all afternoon, he didn't try to defend himself or change my mind. Ryan sat quietly for several seconds. Then he nodded. Slowly. Painfully. Like a man finally accepting something he'd spent years avoiding. When he stood up to leave, he stopped near the front door. So that's it? I looked at him. For once, there wasn't an argument hiding inside the question. No trap. No manipulation. Just disappointment. I took a breath. I think it ended a long time before the text. Ryan lowered his eyes. A few seconds later, he walked outside. I watched him cross the driveway toward his sister's car. Neither of them left immediately. They sat there talking for several minutes. Then the passenger door opened. And for the first time all day, I felt a genuine sense of relief. Because I thought it was over. I was wrong. The next morning, Ryan's sister started texting me. By the end of the week, the messages hadn't stopped. 3 days later, the situation escalated when Ryan showed up at my door again, this time with his mother and father. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone lit up. At first, I thought she might be reaching out because she was worried about him. I was wrong. How could you do this to him? A second message followed before I even finished reading the first. 4 years together and you move on in a week? Then another. I honestly thought you loved my brother? I set the phone down and finished my coffee. A year earlier, those messages would have ruined my entire day. I would have drafted responses, deleted them, rewritten them, and spent hours trying to convince someone else that I wasn't a terrible person. This time I went to work. By lunch, there were 8 messages. By dinner, there were 15. By the end of the week, I stopped reading them altogether. The strange thing was that the more distance I got from the relationship, the easier it became to recognize behavior I used to excuse. Ryan wasn't the only person in his family who struggled with boundaries. That realization became impossible to ignore 3 days later when my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was before I checked. Ryan stood on the porch. Beside him was his mother. A few steps behind them stood his father, David, carrying the expression of a man who would rather be anywhere else. The second I opened the door, Ryan's mother walked inside without waiting to be invited. She glanced around my living room as if she expected to catch me doing something criminal. Her eyes landed on the coffee table, then the couch, then the hallway. Apparently satisfied that Nathan wasn't hiding somewhere inside the house, she folded her arms. "We need to talk." Ryan looked embarrassed. His father looked exhausted. I closed the door. "About what?" "About what you've done to my son." That answer came so quickly I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she had clearly rehearsed it. "What exactly have I done?" She stared at me as if the answer should have been obvious. "You replaced him. Ryan broke up with me." That's not the point. The moment she said it, I knew exactly how the rest of the conversation would go. Whenever someone says that's not the point, it usually means you've accidentally found the point. "He ended the relationship," I said calmly. "What was I supposed to do?" "Give him time." I gave him a week. "You knew he didn't mean it." That one caught me off guard. Not because it was surprising, because she said it so casually. Like ending relationships wasn't supposed to mean ending relationships. Like everyone should automatically know which breakups counted and which ones didn't. I glanced at Ryan. He looked away. That told me everything. His mother hadn't invented that belief. She'd learned it from him. Or maybe he'd learned it from her. At that point, I wasn't sure which came first. Ryan's father finally spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. "Maybe we should hear Claire out." His wife shot him a look. He ignored it. For the first time since arriving, I noticed something interesting. David wasn't surprised by any of this. He wasn't confused. He wasn't shocked. He looked like someone watching a movie he'd already seen 3 times. Ryan's mother turned back toward me. "What I want to know is how you could throw away 4 years so easily." I stared at her for a second. Then I shook my head. "I didn't throw away 4 years." Nobody interrupted. So I continued. "Ryan threw away pieces of it every time he used the relationship as a test." The room became still. Ryan immediately lowered his eyes. His mother looked furious. "But David?" David sighed. A long, tired sigh. The kind that comes from hearing something you've known for years, finally spoken out loud. "She's right." His wife turned toward him. "What?" David met her stare. "She's right." Even Ryan looked stunned. For a moment, nobody knew what to say. David looked down for a moment before continuing. "I should have said something sooner," he admitted. "I kept convincing myself he'd grow out of it. That's on me." The room stayed silent. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad!" "No." The word wasn't loud, but it stopped him immediately. David sat down in the armchair and looked at his son. "I remember Christmas 2 years ago." Ryan closed his eyes. That reaction told me he remembered too. "You disappeared from dinner because Claire disagreed with you about a movie." His wife blinked. "A movie?" "Yes." David nodded. "A movie." He looked at me. "You spent 40 minutes outside trying to convince him to come back." The memory hit me instantly. Cold weather. Christmas lights. My hands shaking because I thought our relationship might be ending over a disagreement about a film neither of us even liked that much. At the time, I thought I was fighting for love. Now it sounded ridiculous. David wasn't finished. There was the birthday dinner. I groaned internally. I remembered that one too. Ryan had become angry because I spent too much time talking to an old college friend. He barely spoke to me for 3 days afterward. Eventually, I apologized. Again, David shook his head. "I've seen versions of this over and over." Ryan stayed quiet. His mother didn't. "He's sensitive." "No," David replied calmly. "He's afraid." That answer surprised everyone, including Ryan. David leaned forward. "I think he spent years believing people leave eventually, so he keeps testing whether they'll stay." The room fell silent again. Ryan stared at the floor. His mother looked between them. For the first time all afternoon, uncertainty appeared on her face. "Just a little, but enough." David continued. "The problem is that if you keep testing people long enough, eventually one of them gets tired." Nobody argued. Nobody could. Because everyone in the room knew exactly what he meant. A few minutes later, Ryan finally spoke. His voice sounded worn out. "I ended it." His mother turned toward him. "What?" "I sent the text." He swallowed hard. "I told Claire we were done." The admission seemed to age him. Not physically, emotionally. Like he was finally carrying responsibility instead of pushing it onto someone else. Then he looked at me. For the first time since arriving, there wasn't any anger in his eyes. No accusation. No expectation. Just a question. "Are you happier?" I answered honestly. "Yes." Ryan nodded slowly. That answer hurt him. I could see it, but he didn't argue. Because deep down, he already knew why. A few minutes later, they left. His mother looked frustrated. David looked relieved. Ryan looked like someone trying to understand how a game he'd always won had finally ended differently. I thought that would be the last time I saw any of them. It wasn't. Over the next month, mutual friends started hearing different versions of the story. A few people quietly reached out to me after that. Not because they wanted gossip. They wanted to know whether what Ryan was saying was actually true. The more questions people asked, the harder it became for him to keep telling the same version of the story. Ryan told people he'd been overwhelmed, that he'd needed space, that I'd moved on immediately. The problem was that stories fall apart when too many people compare notes. Soon enough, questions started appearing. Questions Ryan couldn't answer. Questions about the previous breakups. Questions about the emotional tests. Questions about why he'd admitted he expected me to chase him. Meanwhile, life became surprisingly peaceful. Nathan and I took things slowly. Neither of us wanted drama. Neither of us wanted gossip. We just enjoyed spending time together. One night we were deciding where to eat dinner when I caught myself waiting for an argument that never came. Nathan noticed immediately. "What?" I laughed. "Nothing." He narrowed his eyes. "That's never true." I smiled. "I think I'm still getting used to normal." His expression softened. Then he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll take our time. Simple words. No games. No tests. No conditions." A month later, there was another knock at my door. This time it was David. Alone. He handed me a paper bag containing coffee and pastries. I figured this was easier than pretending I was actually in the neighborhood. I laughed. He laughed too. And for the next hour, we sat on the patio talking. Before leaving, he paused near the gate. "You know something?" "What?" He smiled. "I haven't seen you this relaxed in years." After he left, I sat outside watching the sun disappear behind the trees. A text arrived a few minutes later. "Nathan, dinner tomorrow?" I smiled before typing back. "Absolutely." The message took all of 3 seconds. Then I put my phone down and watched the last bit of sunlight disappear beyond the fence. A year earlier, I would have spent that evening staring at my phone, wondering how to stop someone from walking away. Instead, I sent one message, slipped my phone into my pocket, and went inside. I slipped my phone into my pocket and headed inside. Nathan and I had dinner plans tomorrow, and for once, that was the only thing on my mind.